What do you believe is going to be the real differentiation? Will be distribution, operation, risk selection, or something else?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not insurance born and bred, right? So I'm sure that you could ask this question to somebody who's spent their whole career and get some really different, nuanced answers, right? I'm not going to try and stray into that world candidly. I think all of those things are ripe for improvement. I think I'd go back to my earlier answer a little bit and say, for me, it always comes back to trying to put the customer at the heart of it, right? So if you're doing whatever it is that you're doing in the service of improving the offering that you give to your customer.
What do you feel is going to be at the forefront, available for MGAs, reinsurance brokers, NGUs, reinsurers, especially around workflow, data, and even execution?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of discussions with our customers about, can you integrate your data with a platform, with another vendor? And for a long time, we've been able to say, essentially, yes, whenever you're ready, we can do that. We built the APIs, we've got the endpoints, etc. What we're starting to see now is that that's turning from this sort of, I need to understand from a procurement perspective that I can tick that box to, oh, okay, we are now ready to move. And that is certainly true, at the top end and in the mid-market, and increasingly sort of in that long tail of smaller entities that we work with.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Delegated Authority. Today's guest is Mark Trumper, Managing Director of AXCO Insurance Information, a leading global provider of insurance market intelligence and compliance data relied upon by insurers, reinsurers, MGAs, MGUs, brokers, and risk professionals worldwide. Mark brings a rare blend of commercial leadership, operational transformation, and technology-driven strategy, having led international teams across organizations like LexisNexis Business Information Solutions before taking the helm at AXCO, where he successfully shifted the business from flat revenue to sustainable growth through product modernization, data-led decision-making, and cultural alignment. With deep experience in customer experience, analytics, pricing, sales enablement, and large-scale change management, Mark has a front-row view in how insurers and reinsurers use data to structure compliant global programs and how technology is reshaping decision-making across the industry. Mark's perspective sits at the intersection of information, execution, and commercial performance, making this a conversation about how insurance and reinsurance organizations evolve in practice, not theory. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here. That's quite the introduction. Thank you.
No, really enjoyed building that bio for you. The first question that I have is, sometimes people think about, let's say, insurance market data. They often think there's static reports. What does it take to turn that data into something that is truly actionable nowadays?
So when I think about that question, two things come to my mind, and that's context, firstly, and flexibility, second. So in terms of context, it's often the case that you might see some kind of trend in the data that you're looking at, perhaps claims going up over a period of time, or a dramatic increase in some written premium in a particular line of business. And, in and of itself, you kind of understand what's happening to claims, they're going up, but you want to know why that's happening. Context is the key. So at AXCO, for example, we provide a lot of context around just the numbers themselves. So we try and link it to natural catastrophe data or changes in industry regulation. So for example, you could see that claims are going up, and then sort of look in the panel alongside it and say, oh, well, actually, I see that there were some wildfires in that particular country during that particular year, had a big impact, and that's what's driving that change. Or it could be something regulatory, right? It could be the reason the auto insurance premiums are going up are that, that was the year that having auto insurance became legally required. And then, of course, that shifted the market and changed. So I think context is key. In terms of flexibility, having the ability to cut and slice the data in different ways to try and understand the trend in more detail. So the ability to dive down from a macro trend or a piece of insight that's at the top level and dissect it by country, by line of business, by company, having a lot of ability to turn the dials and tweak the knobs to really kind of get under the skin of it. So So I think if you're able to do both those things, you've got something that is much more insightful, much more flexible, and helps you get to an answer that allows you to take an action.
So we're seeing a blend of, let's say, information that's in the market, like regulations, catastrophes happening over there, and then the internal information that they have. When when you engage with a customer, what are the most common decisions that you see that this reinsurance leaders think they're making with data versus what they're actually able to make on their day to day, on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. From a high level, I think most insurance leaders think they're making strategic, forward-looking decisions with data, whether it's pricing or portfolio steering or even market expansion. But day to day, their teams are often limited to whatever data is available, whatever's clean, and frankly, whatever's in front of them. So instead of getting really good predictive insights, they're working with those static reports that you mentioned in your last question. With partial data sets, right? There's only so much I can gather before we have to kind of make a decision and move on. And a lot of manual processes. I think we'll talk about sort of manual processes a little bit as we go through our questions, but having data locked in emails or on spreadsheets, I mean, it's not really available for you to make, a really, really good decision. So, the ambition, I suppose, is analytics-driven decision making with really good, complete data. The reality is that you're kind of engaged in a bit of operational triage with incomplete information, almost independent of which sphere you're operating in.
So I know people want to make good decisions and they want them to be backed up by data and actually take the decision that they have to make. But in your experience, what do you feel is the restriction with the data? Is it access to data, or people don't trust the data, or just having the data in the workflows that they use on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think the answer really depends on the use case, but certainly in our experience, many insurers are struggling with getting the data into their workflows and in front of the right people, crucially at the right time. So, as I mentioned, a huge amount is still done via spreadsheets and emails rather than on kind of a modern platform with workflow capability. And where that happens, the lack of embedded data means that you have the other two factors as well, right? So those being access to data and trust in data. If you're kind of thinking, hey, where did I file that email? And we've all done this, I'm sure, right? In various different sort of pieces of work we've been engaged in. Or is this the latest version of the spreadsheet? Can I trust it? The industry as a whole is making progress, and some companies are doing really well in deploying these sorts of things. But I think really embedding that data into the workflow, getting it in front of the right people at the right time is the biggest bottleneck.
Yeah, people want to do this. And I'm pretty sure they want to embed the data, implement the workflows. And you've been there. You've been in a scenario of hurry up and wait. Transformation, the technology transformation. Why do you feel that those digital initiatives stall, or they just I don't know, the enthusiasm goes away
Yeah.
in a short period of time?
I mean, I've not spent my entire career in insurance, but I've been here long enough to know that insurance really is a people business, right? And that's where I'm going to go to. I think so much of this is about the people as opposed to the process and all the systems. And if you don't engage the teams that are really doing the work, and the phrase I use is really get their fingerprints on the project, then your chances of success are going to be lower. And to your question, right, if you don't get it right at the start, or rather, even if you do get it right at the start, you have to keep that engagement going beyond the initial implementation. It's almost inevitable that you're going to have some challenges after the initial implementation. And if people get their hands on new tools and they don't quite work as well as they thought they would, then they're going to get frustrated. And if management's attitude is that, well, this is deployed and we've trained everyone, so you just need to get on with it, then ultimately you're not really going to get the benefits that you want. You have to, you complete the project, but you have to do the follow through afterwards, post implementation, and just make sure that you continue to listen to your people. And that's when you'll see that sort of sustained level of enthusiasm, that sustained level of engagement.
Yeah, and that goes into something that I've seen also. I call it shelfware, or is the word that I'm more familiar with. What's the difference between actually transforming the operation versus we just bought a tool that nobody uses, but we say we use it because we bought it?
Yeah. I mean, again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I mean, you're talking about people using the tools, right? So yeah, you could be a beautiful tool, lovely user interface, but if your people are still finding workarounds or they're falling back into their old habits, then that's a problem. And usually that's going to come from, either you've not communicated the case for change up front clearly enough. Why are we doing this? Why are we implementing this new solution? What are the benefits? Not just to the business, importantly, but to our customers, who most of your people, if they're good people, will actually care about. And a bit of what's in it for me, right? How is this going to make your life easier? If you can do those things, you'll be successful. And if you see people kind of, saying, well, okay, we've implemented this thing, but you know what? It's still easier if I just email Julie in accounts or Bob in underwriting and get it done the old way. That's when you're heading towards shelfware, I think.
What are those early signals that you have seen that lead to shelfware and not basically delivering the return on investment that was promised at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a lack of engagement, right? I mean, so when we're engaged with a client, because we're a vendor, we can see adoption. So we are able to monitor usage, from the basic things to, like, have people logged in, to slightly more advanced things that, how much time are they spending in the platform, and crucially, are they getting to the outcome points? Now, for us, that might be a data delivery. For example, someone's downloaded a report, or they've exported some data. And for me, those things are things that you need to monitor. So we do that as a commercial vendor. But if you're an insurer or an MGA that's deploying something, you want to have a clear idea of what good engagement with those systems looks like, and be monitoring that on an ongoing basis. And if you're not seeing that, then that's an early warning sign. So for example, if you're seeing somebody log on, spend 30 seconds there, log off, and then not log back in for a couple of days, that's probably not telling you that they're really engaged with the new system, right? Equally, if they're logging on, spending a ton of time before they get to whatever the outcome is, I've closed the case, or I've moved this on to the next stage, then that's probably also not a good sign, right? There's kind of be a sweet spot between I'm logging on, I'm getting my stuff done, it's not taking me ages, and I'm not getting frustrated. So I think, whether you're working with a vendor or you're just working internally, have some idea of what good adoption looks like, and then be able to track some metrics. And that's your early warning system about, is this going in the right direction? Are people engaging with the tools that we've rolled out in the way that we expect them to? Does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
know that. Yeah, that's totally a fair point. Usage, I would say, is the biggest driver here, and how they leverage the tool to get the outcomes they desire. So those are the two main things. And the other question that I have is, you have seen teams be very successful implementing this type of technologies. What have you seen that the leadership and the team that is actually using the platform or the tool do to enable this to actually really happen?
I guess I'd start with the end in mind, and then for me, I'm a big believer in communication, and almost over communication, right? So you've got to be really clear before you write a line of code, or set up the first user. But where is this going to take us, and what are the benefits that we want to get from this? And then have a really clear idea of the various different metrics that you're going to measure along the way. So whether it's usage or adoption, that's great, but you also want to have some idea of the outcomes that you're going to monitor. And you need to do this at the end of a month in a management meeting. You need to be doing this on a regular basis, understanding where are the pinch points right now, and where do we need to sort of apply some focus. And I think the teams that do that really well are the ones that succeed ultimately, and the teams that listen to the stakeholders and their experience of it. We talked a lot about employees, but if you've got something that's you're impacting customers on, you've got to look at their experience as well, and understand what they're telling you in terms of whether it's the data or the direct feedback of their experience. And you need to be doing that, or on a daily, weekly basis, because people's attention spans are much shorter. Their patience is much less for a bad user experience. And so I think the ones that are successful are the people who are listening and have a clear roadmap and can see divergences from that roadmap early, and then have the chance to course correct quickly.
Yeah, I feel communication is always the best lever that you can use. But
Yeah.
sometimes you get people that they're early adopters. They give you their buying to actually do the implementation. But then on the other hand, you have skeptical operators. They don't trust this new software. I don't want to do it. What do you've led this type of migrations? What do you feel customers require to change that behavior from being a skeptical operator, like, hey, I don't want to do this, basically rejecting or even going further to sabotage the project, to actually being vocal and being pro this new solution that's being implemented?
Yeah. So when I hear you ask that question, I'm almost sort of separating people into two groups. So we've had to migrate customers, right? And we've done projects where we've kind of had to do internal migrations of staff, of employees. And to a degree, you start out more or less in the same place. You're trying to establish the case for change and explain the benefits. Now, with employees, you can kind of get to a point where you say, sorry, guys and girls, this is no longer a request, right? We're not negotiating anymore. You just need to get on the bus with us. And I've done my best to answer all your questions. Now, with customers, you can't always do that. So I think it's very much trying to understand, what the outcomes that they care about are, and tying your case for change to that, right? So we might be saying, well, look, if we move to this platform, it's going to save us some money because these newer servers are cheaper and they're a bit faster. Your customers don't care about that, right? They care about what it's going to mean for their teams, what it's going to mean for their customers. We're in the compliance space, right? So there's a benefit to being able to say, well, look, we can get you this data more quickly into the hands of your operational teams more reliably. Therefore, you'll be more compliant, which has a legal, a regulatory aspect to it, and you kind of have to do that, right? Or you get a big fine. Yeah, so sometimes you can take that angle, and other times, it's more about getting the best data into the hands of your business development team so that they can go to market more quickly, they can win more, and that aligns with your strategic growth plan, Mr. Customer, that we've been talking about for the last 6 months. So I think I spent a lot of time as a salesperson, and I guess I put my sales hat back on, right, Daniel? And I kind of go, what do they care about? What outcomes are they trying to drive? And how can I attach myself to those outcomes? And that's really how you persuade customers who are perhaps a little bit more reluctant. And you can't say, well, I'm sorry, you just have to now. And then maybe get some, if you've got those early adopters and you can turn them into fans and sort of internal advocates in some way, that's always helpful.
Yeah, no. What I've seen over the years is people in general want to do a good job. They want to perform. They want to deliver. Something that in change management I've seen is there's parts that are very visible, parts that are not so visible, or let's say underrated, that not enable people to be successful. Let's say, I don't know, what alignment have you seen? Is it incentives? Is it training? Is it the workflow design or leadership attention? What have you seen on as the most underrated part of change management?
I think, incentives certainly help. And that incidentally, that doesn't have to be sort of your classic, there is bonus money here or, vouchers, incentives can be, praise, right? Calling out good behavior in corporate town halls and, just again, holding up those early adopters and saying, look at how this is impacting their job. But for me, I think it's so much about leadership attention for me. I mentioned earlier on, right? So very often you'll get a lot of leadership attention very early in the project. There'll be tons of management focus on the business case and getting that approved and signed off. And then there'll be an initial part of the project where it's really important everybody that needs to do stuff is doing stuff, and there'll be milestones that need to be hit because the board needs an update and so on and so forth. But I think you've really got to stay connected to the project for longer. Now, does that mean that the CEO and the CUO need to stay that connected to it? No, but I think operational leadership certainly does, right? They really need to make sure that you keep communicating the benefits, you keep reinforcing the vision of where this is going, checking in with the people at the sharp end, making sure that you're dealing with those problems that you will run into as they occur. You really can't just kick it off and then sort of wander away from the initial implementation thinking, well, we hit those milestones and it's done, because that change needs to be sustained in the medium and the long term for it to be really successful and for it to get to the place where you want it to go.
They say that that's called discipline, like the hype, everybody's motivated, that you got to rely on discipline to actually make it happen. But
Yeah.
to actually make it happen, or what have you seen? Let's say an MGA brings a new software, a new tool, a new platform. What's usually true behind the scenes that people don't see when implementation goes really, really well?
Yeah. So I think when the implementation goes really, really well, you're going to have happy, you should arguably have happier customers, right? And or partners, some external stakeholders. But your question is less about what happens there and what happens that the outsiders don't see. I think you said earlier on, people generally want to do a good job, right? They want to provide a good service to their stakeholders, whether it is, a colleague who is the next link in the chain in the workflow, right? or whether it is directly having an impact on a customer, most people generally want to deliver those good outcomes, right? And when you've got a team who's kind of laboring with legacy systems that don't allow them to do that, that don't allow them to respond to a request or a complaint, quickly and easily and kind of get back to their customer, that feels really bad. It just saps morale, destroys engagement. So I think one of the true behind the scenes things that a lot of outsiders don't see is that impact on the people who are actually doing the job, right? If you put some really good tools in their hands, they help them deliver those good outcomes, that they'll feel much better about the business that they work for. Management listened to us. We were able to do some things and implement some changes that we've been saying that we needed to change for ages. And they did that throughout the process. And now we've got to a much better place. I think that's underrated because does that show up directly in the numbers at the end of a quarter? Not immediately. But I think in the long term it does, right? There's so much focus on employee engagement, and making sure that people feel good about the businesses that they work for. And at its heart, I think putting modern tools, better tools in the hands of the people who actually do the work has a huge impact on that. And maybe that's not always visible from the outside.
No, those are very, very great points. And I would say the hot topic right now it's AI. What's your view on AI right now? Where do you feel it's actually going to help, let's say, MGA leaders, MGU operators, and where it's actually going to be, let's say, a threat or something that people push away and don't want in their company?
Yeah, so I mean, we run regular sort of events for the global insurance industry. I mean, our area of focus is very specifically kind of in multinational programs, and it's been interesting because over the past 3 years we've had sessions on AI. And in years 1 and 2 of that, it was all kind of theoretical, oh, it's coming and we need to adapt it and we're thinking about it. Now, this year, we went to Miami in November, very nice time of year to go. But the important thing is that actually we were getting real use cases, right? People were standing up on the stage and saying, well, not only is it in theory is it good, but these are some of the interesting things that we're doing with it. And so I think that's a change, right? Is that it's gone from all talk to actually in practice. The other thing I took from that meeting is that there's a ton of different ways, right? So I'm sure your audience will be familiar with businesses that are looking to automate all sorts of aspects of the claims process, right? There's definitely a lot that can be done in there. I'm sure almost everybody listening has their own personal use cases, right? Personal productivity. I need to think through this problem, or I need help writing a difficult, piece of content, difficult email. Help me research this topic. I mean, for us, that is a big piece of the puzzle. Actually doing that research, understanding what a regulatory change might mean, and doing that faster primarily because we still want to have a human in the loop to make sure that we're checking what the AI says. But I think there's so much potential and each business will have a different way of deploying it. But whether it's in that operational space, whether it's in using large language models to identify trends in regulation, or whether it's having an AI look at pictures from claims and assess, well, what does that really look like, and do we think we should pay out? There's a ton of opportunity. But I think what's really interesting is that we're actually starting to see real world examples of this from the insurers, as opposed to, in theory, this is good and we can't ignore it and it's not going away. I will say, I think, and maybe this bleeds into another question though, is that and so many of the AI companies themselves say this is like, AI is not coming for your jobs, but to do the jobs that you're doing now in the future, you're going to have to adopt these tools. I think that I accept that that's true. These tools are here to stay. But I think the people who really win and use it well will be thinking about it not just as this, in theory we can do this. It's like, how does this help us do the things that our customers want to see from us, right? So in the claims space, people want to get paid more quickly, more reliably, and is there a way that we can do that and pay those legitimate claims more quickly versus some theoretical benefit, or using it as a tool to to arbitrarily deny more claims because that's better for the bottom line. I mean, that's in the long term self-defeating. There's a moral and ethical element to doing that, of course. But I think the people who win and use those AI tools are going to be the ones who really think about, well, how do I apply this to get the outcomes that my customers are most interested in? Whether that's a data vendor like us trying to deliver content more quickly, more reliably, or whether it's an insurer, delivering a service.
Yeah. The other thing is that there's so many use cases, so many ways you can apply it, but sometimes you feel, let's say, stuck as a, let's say, MGA owner or a reinsurer, something like that. You feel stuck. How do you feel like, or stuck in legacy system? Let's say they have old systems or they have no systems at all. They run out of the inbox and the Excel spreadsheets that everybody knows. As advisor, what would you say that could be that first step that they could create some momentum to implement this new type of technologies in their day to day?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of implementing some big AI project or, tackling a big legacy system that you've used for, in some cases, decades, right? There's some pretty long tenured companies in the insurance world. That can feel like a really big deal. It can feel quite intimidating. And, especially on the sort of legacy platform replacement, replacing a whole platform can feel like good reason. That's going to be a huge project. And how do I eat that particular elephant? I think what I'd do is say, look, there's an awful lot that you can do that sort of falls into that category of kind of 1% improvements, little incremental improvements. And there are lots and lots of tools out there. And I'm not just thinking about some of the AI tools right now, but like if you just look at the Microsoft Office suite, you've got loads and loads of things in there that probably you got for free and you and your teams can use to make those small incremental, improvements. And you can do it today, right? You can do it this week if you want to. So what we do a lot of, and what I've done a lot of in my career is just try and find the people who are really interested in kind of that continuous improvement journey. And you'll spot them, right? There'll be the guy who built the new macro in the Excel because it saved him and his team or her team, a couple of hours, right? But if you can find those people in your organization and find a way to deploy them to work with teams, carve out a day a week for that's your project day where you're going to sit down with teams and say, hey, just talk to me about the problems. If we just solved a few of these little bits and pieces, would it make a difference? And you can start to implement those fairly easily and you can start to get some momentum. And all of a sudden, all those little 1% changes have added up to something that's really meaningful. And the other nice thing that happens is you've started to change people's mindsets from, oh, the system is terrible and it's never going to change to, hang on a second, yeah, the system's terrible, but there's a load of things that we can do around it that actually start to move us forward. And you can have a big impact on your business in that way. Now, at some point, are you going to have to bite the bullet and do the big system upgrade? Probably, right? But don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You can make some progress today by just looking for those small wins and get a lot of progress in the organization and the team.
Yeah, those are very, very good points. But at some point, let's say AI is going to be table stakes. Everybody will have it. Everybody will have access to the same tools. What do you believe is going to be the real differentiation? Will be distribution, operation, risk selection, or something else?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not insurance born and bred, right? So I'm sure that you could ask this question to somebody who's spent their whole career and get some really different nuanced answers, right? I'm not going to try and stray into that world candidly. I think all of those things are ripe for improvement. I think I'd go back to my earlier answer a little bit and say, for me, it always comes back to trying to put the customer at the heart of it, right? So it, if you're doing whatever it is that you're doing in the service of improving the offering that you give to your customer, the tools are just the way you get there, right? As you say, if it's table stakes, if everybody's using it, well, then the differentiation is still going to be, do I understand what my customers need, what they want? And am I delivering to that? And if I'm doing that with AI or without AI better than my competitor, the firm down the street, whoever it is, then that for me is what it all comes back to do, right? So you've really got to understand your customers, your partners, the ecosystem that you want to operate in, and lean into that, and then figure out how to deploy the tools, and that's what's going to differentiate you, right? As opposed to just the tool that you're using, because AI is just the latest in a long series of productivity enhancements, and there'll be something else 10, 15 years from now, right? There will be the same thing. But I think the companies that really succeed throughout that time are the ones who are thinking, well, how do I apply this technology to drive better outcomes, more value for my customers, and my other stakeholders? I guess that would be my answer.
I really appreciate it, Mark. Looking ahead, let's say 12, 18, 24 months ahead, what do you feel is going to be at the forefront available for MGAs, reinsurance brokers, GUs, reinsurers, especially around workflow, data, and even execution?
Yeah. So we've had a lot of discussions with our customers about, can you integrate your data with a platform, with another vendor? And for a long time we've been able to say essentially yes, whenever you're ready, we can do that. We built the APIs, we've got the endpoints, etc. What we're starting to see now is that that's turning from this sort of, I need to understand from a procurement perspective that I can tick that box to, oh, okay, we are now ready to move, and that is certainly true, at the top end and in the mid market, and increasingly sort of in that long tail of smaller entities that we work with. So I really feel like the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of workflow implementation, getting the data into the systems that people use so that we don't have all these spreadsheets flying around, so that I'm not having to go from the portal over here to the website over there. I can just do what I need to do in some kind of workbench that has that consistent look and feel for me. And of course, that's all about execution, right? It's about being able to make sure that you're delivering your part of the process at the right time. The information that you need is coming to you. It's getting surfaced in that workflow, so that if I need a data point to make a decision on a risk, or if I need to make sure that my compliance checklist is valid, so I'm protecting the company and making sure that I'm doing things in a compliant and legally complying with the regulation. I think that is going to be a big theme as we head into the next 12 to 18 months. And as we get there, I think there's this thirst for more and more data, both in terms of the AI is consuming it, but then being able to give that to the people in the process who make that decision. So I think the other trend is going to be back to one of your earlier points around trust. So data will be almost ubiquitously available, the benefits and risks of AI. But for sure, a lot of people are saying, well, can I trust this data? And there's all sorts of examples from the funny to the very serious about instances where the AI hallucinates, makes something up. And, when you're in our business, which is particularly around regulatory compliance, that could be really bad for your business. And so you need to be able to evidence that you've made a good decision based on trusted data. So I think people will go from, actually, I can get this data, to, well, you know what? This is serious stuff, and I'm making a decision that could impact the future of my business. And therefore, I need to make sure that I'm trusting that data. And there are lots of great companies out there that are doing a really good job of helping their clients. I hope AXCO is one of those, to get access to really good data that people can trust and then integrate that into those workflows. So I think that's probably what you'll see for me, that the really strong insurance and reinsurance organizations do, making sure they've got good trusted data that they can make solid decisions on, and processes that really support their people to give good outcomes to their customers.
No, that's a really great point. And to trust data, you need to know the origin or the lineage of the data to make sure it's, I would say, trustworthy. But no, really appreciate. Thank you very much, Mark, for the time. This was Inside Delegated Authority with Mark Trumper and your host, Daniel. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you,
Bye.
Daniel. This is great.